Hi all, for this lecture we'll talk about ways to display data graphically. There are a lot of ways to displaying data graphically, but we're just going to be talking and focusing on histograms, particularly because sake of time, but also because they're the most important since they give us an idea of how the data looks. Histograms are only for quantitative data. We aren't focusing on qualitative data, but for qualitative data, you do something like a pie chart or a bar graph. So the basic ones, which you probably already know of. Some questions I'll ask you to do by hand, but to draw the histograms, we will be doing that through StatCrunch, which is a computing program that comes with my stat lab. And I talked about this a little bit in my stat lab tutorial video. All right, so let's look at this example here. Suppose we have speeds of people driving in a 45 mile per hour zone. And these are the speeds that the police officer clocked, people driving. So what we first want is the relative frequency distribution. So we want first to create a table that looks like this, where we divide the data up into categories such as 35 to 39, 40 to 44, etc. And then the frequency, which is it just means how many people are in each category. So this means we have one person in the 35 to 39 miles per hour group, and 6 people were driving between 40 to 44 miles per hour, etc. And the relative frequency is just the frequency out of 100%, written as a decimal. So, for instance, this 0.04 comes from 1 out of 25, and then this 0.24 is 6 out of 25. So now let's talk about the class limits in particularly. For our purposes, I will tell you two things. One, I want you to make a distribution. First is the lower limit, which in this case will be 35. And the next thing I'll tell you about is the bin or class width. In this case, it's 5. So for this distribution, here the lower class limit means that the first category starts at 35, like I said, plus the width of 5 means that the next category above that is 5 above the previous one. So 35 to 40, then plus 5, so 45, and then to 50. The reason we don't go 35 to 40 and 40 to 45 is because then someone who is driving 40 miles per hour would get accounted for twice. So we don't want any overlap in our category. You will be asked to make these tables. StatCrunch won't make these for you. So StatCrunch will make the graphs, but you'll have to make these tables. And one thing I didn't mention is that it would not be incorrect to start at a different place. There's a lot of different ways you could do a histogram, but I like to start at a nice rounded number, and I like my widths also to be nice round numbers. So while it wouldn't be incorrect to start at 38, but if you're told to start at 35, then you need to start at 35. Otherwise, points will be deducted on your assignments or test. So how do you decide what categories to use? A couple of things. You want to have a reasonable number of categories. And think about any statistical graph you look at. You usually don't spend very long looking at it. Usually you look at it to get a quick picture view of what the data looks like, and you move on. So your graph should be organized and easy to read. And what I think is the most important is the groups have to be meaningful to what you are studying. Don't just make more groups, categories, or combine categories for the sake of it. Make sure it means something to what you're studying. Okay, here's the histogram of the distribution. Now to see how this is drawn, there will be a video example, so please watch that because it'll go over how to use StatCrunch. So you see here, this goes from 35 to 39, which is 4%, and then 40 to 45 is 24%, and I would say it follows an approximately normal distribution. So a little bit of practice on creating categories, because this gives people some trouble sometimes. So if you're asked to create categories with width 10 that start at 50, you would want the first category to start at 50, and the second would start at 60, and the third one at 70, etc. You would want it to go up to the next closest value, so you wouldn't go 50 to 60. You would go 50 to 59, 60 to 69, and 70 to 79, etc. And you do the same thing if you were asked to create categories of width 20 starting at 500. So we would have 500 to 519, 520 to 539. The width size is 500 to 520, 540, and these are our upper limits. Okay, you want to watch the video on how to create these in StatCrunch so you can do these for homework and tests. And again, keep in mind the purpose of why we're creating these histograms, and that is to look at the distributions of the data. So that's it.